In the last episode of this series, we learned that we would like to have our upper sternum, lower sternum, eighth ribs, and iliacs all on the same plane. But we were left with the question of how we would ever be able to determine such a thing in our own body. Is there something we could do that would allow us to put this knowledge into action and change the shape of our torso? Now, we could take a picture of ourselves from the side and get a decent idea of whether or not these landmarks on our bony structures were on the same plane. But that would only help us after the fact. Is there something we could do in the present moment to help us align these points and verify that they are all on the same plane? It seems like a very difficult thing to do, but there is a relatively simple procedure that we can follow. This basic concept was first used by Francois Delsarte more than 100 years ago, but Jean de Massuero has refined it into something very straightforward. If we want our upper sternum, lower sternum, eighth ribs, and iliacs all on the same plane, we could rephrase that as saying we want all those points to be the same distance from a wall that is in front of us. We can see with an image how if we simply add lines of equal length to the front of each of these points, that we can see which are too far forward and which are too far back. In real life, we can replicate this by using yardsticks or pieces of wood of equal length. Really, we could use any similarly shaped objects of equal length that are relatively sturdy. If we have multiple yardsticks, we can place them against our upper sternum, lower sternum, eighth ribs, and iliacs. We can measure the distance from these points to a wall that is in front of us. If a yardstick doesn't fit, that point is too close, and we need to make room by moving that point back away from the wall. If we have too much room for the yardstick, we are too far back, and we need to move that point forward towards the wall. As you can see, this works even when you're sitting, and to start off, it will be easier to use this type of procedure while sitting. When seated, first make sure that your yardstick is snugly between your iliac and the wall. That will give you a good base to start from. Then use another yardstick to test your upper sternum, lower sternum, and eighth ribs. You can even do this with just one yardstick or piece of wood. As long as you don't move your iliac once you've set it, you can take the yardstick out and test the other points. You will likely find that your lower sternum is too close to the wall to be able to fit your yardstick, and you will likely also find that your sternum is too far back. We will explore the best means by which to bring these points onto the same plane in the future, but this is something you can begin to experiment with on your own. Can you move your upper sternum forward? Can you do so without also moving your lower sternum forward? This is where having at least two yardsticks can be helpful, as you may find it's difficult to move the upper sternum forward without also moving the lower sternum forward, which is not what we want. Here we can see that the yardsticks are not just measuring tools, they can also serve as a block. If you manage to make space for the yardstick to fit between your lower sternum and the wall, you will likely find that your upper sternum is then too far back. If you keep the yardstick between your lower sternum and the wall, you will not be able to move your lower sternum forward. It will be blocked by the yardstick. And so you can experiment with orchestrating the movement of your upper sternum forward without having to worry about your lower sternum going forward too. This is a very helpful procedure to use when beginning to try to change your posture, because it will allow you to experiment with making movements that you otherwise may find impossible to coordinate. But there is still at least one quite glaring question concerning the torso. We have discussed how we want the bony structures that make up the torso to be oriented relative to each other. But how do we want our torso to be oriented in relation to our legs? If we do manage to get our upper sternum, lower sternum, eighth ribs, and iliacs onto the same plane, where should that plane be in relation to our legs? And where do we want the weight of the torso to rest? Do we want the weight of our torso to be in front of our legs, directly over our legs, or behind our legs? I'll give you a hint, it may not be what you expect. Think it over, and then tune in to the next episode, where we will answer this question and continue to delve further into understanding the mysterious an unfamiliar world that is your own body.